Be honest. When you hear NVIDIA today, what do you see? Artificial intelligence? Self-driving cars? Or maybe just a guy in a leather jacket holding a chip worth more than the entire economy of a small country? It's easy to forget that before they were a trillion-dollar empire, they were just three guys in a Denny's diner trying to figure out how to make video games look less like potato soup and more like reality. But how did we get here? How did we go from pixelated squares to path-traced cyberpunks? And what happened in between to turn a struggling startup into the king of computing? We're going to break down every major era of NVIDIA GPUs, from the disastrous cards that almost bankrupted them, to the legendary 1080 Ti that refused to die, and finally, to the massive bricks we put in our PCs today. By the end, you'll know exactly why your wallet hurts every time a new generation launches. Let's go! The era of confusion, NV1 and Riva, 1995 to 1998. Let's rewind to 1995. The internet was a baby, and 3D graphics were, well, terrifying. Enter the NV1, NVIDIA's first attempt. And oh boy, was it weird. Most companies were using triangles to build 3D models. You know, polygons. But NVIDIA? They looked at everyone else and said, nah, let's use squares. Quadratic texture mapping. Sounds fancy, right? In reality, it was a mess. It broke compatibility with almost everything. It was like trying to fit a square peg, literally, into a triangular hole. The card failed. Hard. NVIDIA was on the brink of bankruptcy. They had money for maybe one last try. They fired the square idea into the sun and built the Riva 128. This was their do-or-die moment, and guess what? It worked. It wasn't the best card, but it was fast. Blazing fast. It put them back in the game against the giant of that era, 3DFX.
Remember 3DFX? Keep that name in mind. It won't end well for them.
Then came the Riv 8, Twin Texel. Basically, it could do two things at once instead of one. It ran hot. It had driver issues. But it proved one thing. NVIDIA was hungry. 1999, the year everything changed. NVIDIA released the GeForce 256. Before this, we just called them video cards or 3D accelerators. But NVIDIA's marketing team woke up and decided to coin a new term, the GPU, Graphics Processing Unit. Was it just marketing fluff? Actually, no. See, before the GeForce 256, your CPU had to do all the heavy lifting for lighting and geometry. It was like asking a mathematician to paint a portrait. He can do it, but he's going to complain the whole time. The GeForce 256 introduced hardware T and L, transform and lighting. It took that workload off the CPU. Suddenly, the artist was doing the painting, and the mathematician could go back to math. Games like Quake 3 Arena ran smoother than butter. The competition, 3DFX, was still trying to use multiple chips to do what NVIDIA did with one. Spoilers, NVIDIA bought 3DFX a year later and buried them. Ruthless. Then we got the GeForce 2, 3, and 4. The GeForce 3 was actually massive because it introduced programmable shaders. This is the tech that finally let water look like water, and not just blue moving carpet. But history teaches us one thing. When you get to the top, you get arrogant. Welcome to 2003, the GeForce FX series, specifically the FX 5800 Ultra. Oh man, if you know, you know. This card wasn't just a disappointment, it was a meme before memes were a thing. It ran so hot and the fan was so loud, people called it the Dustbuster. Seriously, it sounded like a hairdryer taking off inside your PC case. Imagine trying to play a stealth game, but your computer sounds like a jet engine. Stealth achieved. On top of that, it struggled with DirectX 9. Half-Life 2 ran like a slideshow. ATI, who makes Radeon now, was crushing them. It was NVIDIA's biggest failure since the NV1. But sometimes you need to fail to learn. Because what came next defined a generation. November 2006. The GeForce 8800 GTX launches. This was a monster. Usually, a new card is maybe 20% or 30% faster than the old one. The 8800 GTX was over 100% faster than the previous generation. It unified shaders. It destroyed everything in its path. But why is it legendary? Because of one question. But can it run Crysis? When Crysis came out a year later, it melted computers. The 8800 GTX was the only card that stood a chance. If you bought this card in 2006, you were still playing games on high settings 3 or 4 years later. That never happens anymore. It was expensive, sure, but it was worth every penny. Fast forward a bit. We had the GTX 200 series. Decent. And then, we got Fermi. The GTX 400 series. Remember the Dustbuster? Well, meet the grill. The GTX 480 was fast, yes. It brought us CUDA Cores, which are huge for work today. But for gamers? It ran at 90 degrees Celsius. Idle. People literally, and I'm not joking, made videos of themselves frying eggs on the heatsink. Who needs a stove when you have SLI GTX 480s? It was loud, hot, and power-hungry. They fixed it later with the GTX 500 series, but the reputation stuck. Thermi. Let's skip the 600 and 700 series. They were fine, Titan was cool, whatever. Let's get to the moment everyone remembers fondly. 2016. The Pascal architecture. The GTX 10 series. The GTX 1080 was incredible, but then they released the king, the GTX 1080 Ti. It was beautiful. $699, 11 gigabytes of VRAM, performance that rivaled cards twice its price. This card was so good that even in 2024, people are still using it. It refused to become obsolete. NVIDIA accidentally made a card too good. They probably looked at the sales numbers years later and said, oops, let's never give them that much value again. And that brings us to the modern era. 2018, the 20 series. It just works. NVIDIA changed the name. GTX became RTX. Why? Ray tracing. Real-time light simulation. It's the holy grail of graphics. The problem? The RTX 2080 was barely faster than the 1080 Ti in normal games, and turning on ray tracing tanked your FPS by half. Pay more, get less frames. Great deal, right? But they had an ace up their sleeve. DLSS, Deep Learning Supersampling, using AI to upscale the image. At first, it looked blurry, but with DLSS 2.0 and now 3.0, it's magic. It essentially creates free performance out of thin air. Then came the 30 series, launched during the pandemic. You couldn't buy them. Miners bought them. Scalpers bought them. You watched stock alerts at 3 a.m. just to see an out-of-stock button. It was a dark time for PC builders. And finally, the 40 series, the RTX 4090. It's the size of a cinder block. It costs $1,600. It melts power connectors. But it is undeniably the fastest thing on the planet. So that's the journey. From the failed squares of the NV1 to the Dustbuster FX to the legendary 1080 Ti, and finally, the AI-powered monsters we have today. NVIDIA isn't just a gaming company anymore. They power the AI revolution. But for us, it's still about high frames and good graphics. Now, here's the thing. You just learned about the brain of your graphics, but what about the brain of your actual PC, the CPU? Intel versus AMD, the blue team versus the red team. If you think the GPU history was chaotic, wait until you hear about the time AMD almost went bankrupt, and then came back to destroy Intel's dominance.